the outcome is that Ponting has won the toss and elected to field. Most captains would have chosen to bat, but it might be worth a gamble. The umpires are already on their way to the middle, and here come the team. And a very, very warm reception. So let's take a look at the teams. Here's the lineup for India. Gambhir, Sehwag, Tendulkar, Dravid, Ganguly, Yuvraj Singh, Dhoni, Harbhajan Singh, Agarkar, Khan and Nehra. And here's the lineup for Australia. Gilchrist, Hayden, Ponting, Martin, Kadich, Clark, Simons, Hogg, Lee, Gillespie and McGrath. Gambhir is going to face the first ball of the innings. Gambhir facing. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. McGrath to Gambhir. Gambhir facing.
Richie, can you explain why fielding has become increasingly an important part of the game?
Fielding in modern cricket is outstanding, and that's due to the fact that if you're not a brilliant fielder in limited overs matches, you simply don't get a Guernsey in the national team. There have always been great fieldsmen in every era. For me, Neil Harvey remains one of the best all-round fielders I've ever seen. Sehwag waiting at the striker's end. Gillespie to bowl to Sehwag. Gillespie to bowl to Sehwag. Sehwag facing. Good ball. Gillespie to Sehwag.
The batsman should be looking to score more quickly from now on.
McGrath continues. McGrath at the start of his run-up. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. That's been given as a wide.
The umpires are pretty...
Gambhir facing. McGrath continues. That was a cracking delivery from McGrath. McGrath to bowl to Gambhir. McGrath continues. And the end of the over.
India have made a slow start here, so they need to up the scoring rate if they want to set anything like a proper target.
Gillespie to Sehwag. Sehwag facing. Gillespie continues. Sehwag waiting at the striker's end. Gillespie to bowl to Sehwag. Gillespie had the batsman in trouble with that one. Gillespie continues.
India need to up the tempo a little here if they're to stay in contention.
McGrath to begin a new over. That's wonderful bowling from McGrath. McGrath to Gambhir. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. McGrath continues. Gambhir facing. Wide ball signalled by the umpire.
There are stricter rules on.
McGrath to bowl to Gambhir. McGrath continues. That's the end of the fifth over.
India should be looking to attack a little.
Gillespie to Sehwag. That is a perfect line. Sehwag waiting at the striker's end. Gillespie continues. Gillespie to Sehwag. Gillespie had the batsman in trouble with that one. Sehwag facing. Sehwag facing. accurate stuff from Gillespie.
The batsman will feel under pressure to score.
McGrath to bowl to Gambhir. McGrath continues. Good bowling from McGrath. McGrath continues. McGrath to bowl to Gambhir. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. McGrath had the batsman in trouble with that one. McGrath to Gambhir. .43 overs are left in the innings. Sehwag to face an over of spin. Sehwag facing. Clark to Sehwag. Sehwag waiting at the striker's end. Clark to bowl to Sehwag. Sehwag waiting at the striker's end. .42 overs are left for
India. That was a good, tight over.
Gambhir is now facing. McGrath continues. That was very close to the stumps. Gambhir facing. McGrath continues. McGrath to bowl to Gambhir. Gambhir facing. That's been given as a wide. McGrath to Gambhir. Clark to start another over of this long spell.
That could prove very costly later in the match.
Clark continues. Clark continues. Sehwag waiting at the striker's end. Clark to Sehwag. Clark continues. Clark kept tight in that over.
A batsman likes to keep the scoreboard ticking over. If he becomes bogged down, he'll begin to get frustrated. And that...
McGrath, the ball to Gambhir. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. Gambhir facing. McGrath continues. McGrath had the batsman in trouble with that one. McGrath, the ball to Gambhir. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. Wide ball signalled by the umpire. McGrath to Gambhir.
India will need to start scoring at a quicker rate if they wish to set a decent total.
Clark to begin a new over.
That's poor cricket. He took his eye off the ball.
Clark continues. Clark, the ball to Sehwag. Sehwag facing. Clark continues.
The bowler doesn't look too happy about that one. Misfields are infuriating for a bowler.
Sehwag waiting at the striker's end.
Oh dear, that's a poor piece of fielding. He seemed to take his eye off the ball.
And the end of the over.
This run rate needs to be lifted soon. Otherwise, they'll miss their chance to try to achieve a good total.
McGrath to Gambhir. McGrath continues. Gambhir facing. McGrath the ball to Gambhir. McGrath continues. McGrath to Gambia. McGrath continues. Sehwag facing. Simons to Sehwag. Sehwag waiting at the striker's end. Sehwag facing. Simons to bowl to Sehwag. Simons to bowl to Sehwag.
Oh dear, that's a terrible misfield. More runs to the batting team.
Bowling figures for Simons. 1. Gambia waiting at the striker's end. That was very close to the stumps. Gambia facing. McGrath to Gambia. McGrath continues. That's superb bowling from McGrath. McGrath continues. McGrath to Gambia. That's the end of the 15th over.
That's a superb over. Now the pressure will be on.
Simons to start another over of this long spell. That's pierced the offside field. A single to Sehwag. Gambia waiting at the striker's end. Simons to continue with his off-spin. Simons had the batsman in trouble with that one. Simons to bowl to Gambia. Simons continues. That's wonderful bowling from Simons. Simons to continue with his off-spin. Overs are left in the innings.
It's about time we saw some quicker scoring from India.
Sehwag is now facing. That's turned away through mid-wicket. There's just one there. Gambhir facing. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. Hogg to bowl to Gambhir. Hogg to Gambhir. Well, that's off the batsman's pads. Sehwag waiting at the striker's end. Two runs were picked up from that over by Sehwag.
This run rate needs to be lifted soon.
Simons to begin a new over. Simons continues. Simons to bowl to Gambhir. Gambhir facing. That was just a kitten's whisker away from the stumps. Simons to continue with his off-spin. Simons had the batsman in trouble with that one. Gambhir facing.
An excellent over there. He didn't give the...
Sehwag to face an over of spin. Two runs here. Clark out at long on. One run. Hogg to Gambhir. Hogg continues. Hogg continues. That was a lively delivery by Hogg. Hogg to bowl to Gambhir. Wide ball signalled by the umpire.
Australia are bowling too many wides out there. They need to keep...
Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. .31 overs are left for India. Simons to Sehwag. He's worked that into the gap. Fielded by the man at long on. Just one run. Simons continues. Simons to continue with his off-spin. Simons to continue with his off-spin. Simons continues. Gambhir facing. And the end of the over. Hogg to start another over of this long spell. Play it away with comfort. Fielded by the man out long on. There's Hogg to bowl to Gambhir. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. Hogg to Gambhir. Hogg continues. Hogg to bowl to Gambhir. A very good over. Only one offered in the end.
It's about time we saw some quicker scoring.
Simons continues. He's got it into the gap. Clark out at long on. Gambhir facing. Simons to continue with his off spin. Simons to Gambhir. Gambhir facing. Simons continues. A very good over. Only one offered in the end. Sehwag waiting at the striker's end. Should be some runs here. Fielded by the man out long on. Another run. Gambhir facing. Hogg continues. Hogg had the batsman in trouble with that one. Hogg to bowl to Gambhir.
The bowler doesn't look too happy about that one. Misfields are infuriated.
Hogg to Gambhir. Hogg continues. Seven overs are left in the innings. Steered expertly into the gap. And he's Simons to continue with his off-spin. Good bowling from Simons. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. Simons continues.
Oh dear, that's a poor piece of fielding. He seemed to take his eye off the...
Simons to bowl to Gambhir. Simons to continue with his off-spin. The bowling figures for Simons. Gillespie continues. Sehwag facing. McGrath out at long on. One more. Gillespie to Gambhir. Well bowled. Gambhir facing. Gillespie continues. That's turned away through mid-wicket. Gillespie to Gambhir. That's the end of the 25th over. Simons to start another over of this long spell. Simons to bowl to Gambhir. Simons to continue with his off-spin. Simons continues. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end.
That could prove very costly later in the match.
Simons to continue with his off-spin.
You must be sure that you keep your eyes on the ball or you'll fumble it just like that.
A very good over. Only one off it in the end.
It's about time we saw
Gillespie to begin a new over. He's got it into the gap. McGrath out at long on. Sehwag moves on. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. Fielded by the man at long on. That's the first runs of the day for Gambhir. Gillespie continues. That's pierced the lakeside field. Gillespie, the ball to Gambhir. Gillespie to Gambhir. That was a no ball by Gillespie. There's Gillespie, continues. Gambhir facing. Four runs came from that over. Sehwag is now facing. That's forced away through the offside. That takes Simons to continue with his off-spin. Simons to Gambhir. That was a cracking delivery from Simons. Simons continues. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. Gambhir facing. And the end of the over.
The crowd came here today to see some exciting cricket, but this run rate is just about putting them to sleep, I'd say.
Gillespie continues. Ouch, that must have hurt. Gillespie, the ball to Sehwag. Gillespie continues. That's found the gap in the field. Gillespie to Gambhir. Two runs here. Fielded by the man at long on. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. Gambhir facing. Played into the gap. McGrath held it long on. One run to Gambhir. Two runs were picked up from that over by Gambhir.
India needs to put the pressure back on the opposite.
Simons to continue with his off-spin. Simons had the batsman. Simons, the ball to Gambhir. Simons continues. Good ball. Simons continues. That's well bowled by Simons. Simons to continue with his off-spin. Simons had the batsman in trouble with that one. Simons to bowl to Gambhir. Clark out at long on. Just one run, 20 overs are left in the innings.
It's about time we saw
Gillespie to begin a new over. Gambhir facing. Gillespie to Gambhir. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. Gillespie continues. Gillespie to bowl to Gambhir. That was a no ball by Gillespie.
You can't afford to bowl too many no balls in one.
Gillespie continues. Sehwag is now facing. That was a no ball by Lee. There's Gambhir facing. Lee to Gambhir. I think he'll be okay. It'll sting a bit though. Oh, that could be a very painful blow. These runs will be signalled. Let's see the action replay of that. Hit straight to a fielder. Gambhir facing. I need Lee to bowl to Sehwag. Lee to Sehwag. Spot on, line and length. 7 runs came from that over for India. These two have Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. Play it away with comfort. Fielded by the man at long on. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. He's really given that a whack. 6 runs.
The bowler won't like that one little bit.
Let's take a look at that in slow motion. by Clark. Gillespie, the ball to Gambhir. Gillespie continues. That's been given as a wide.
Australia are bowling too many wide.
Gillespie to Gambhir. Clark out at long on. The score is now Sehwag facing. It's straight at Clark. 7 runs were picked up from that over by Sehwag. But Lee to begin a new over. Clark is chasing that one. They've turned that into 2. That's good running. Lee, the ball to Gambhir. Clark is in pursuit. Great shot by Gambhir. Really, we can have a look at that again. Clark is after it. Well, that'll beat the fielder. He found the gap with precision. Let's see the action replay of that. Clark is after that one. Fielded by the man at long on. Played into the gap. Lee continues. Hit straight to a fielder. Lee to Gambhir. Clark is in pursuit. The 50 is up for India. That over helped the run rate somewhat. Sehwag is now on strike. Sehwag facing. Clark is after that one. Clark is not going to reach that. The 50 is, let's take a look at that in slow motion. Clark is chasing that one. That's a fantastic strike. This partnership is really frustrating the bowlers.
He absolutely loves to play that shot.
We can have a look at that again. That's over the rope. 6 runs off Gillespie.
He's always looking.
Let's see the action replay of that. Gillespie to Sehwag. Clark is after it. He's got onto that one. Sehwag moves on to 35. Let's take a look at that in slow. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. Lee continues. There should be some runs here. Picked up on the boundary by Simons. Lee to Gambhir. Lee continues. That's a huge six. Lee, we can have a look at that again. And six. Partnership between these two is now worth 75. Let's take a look at that in slow motion. That was a lively delivery by Lee. 14 overs are left for India. These two players have now... Gillespie continues. Clark is chasing that one. That's over the rope. 6 runs off Gillespie. Sehwag. Let's see the action replay of that. The batsman didn't look at all comfortable there. Gillespie, the bowl to Sehwag. Gillespie continues. Tadic is after that one. That's pierced the leg side field. 4 runs to Sehwag. We can have a look at that again. There it goes. And there's a fielder under it.
Well taken. He never looked like dropping.
Gillespie gets his first wicket. Sehwag scored 25 runs from 0 balls.
That's not a good way to get out, and that will be playing on his mind.
This was how the wicket fell. Tendulkar waiting at the striker's end. A cracking stroke. He found the gap with... Let's take a look at that in slow motion. Gambhir is now on strike. Clark out at long on. India are 1. Lee continues. Lee
got everything wrong there and played.
This was how the innings ended for Tendulkar. Lee to Travid. Lee and the batsman in trouble with that one. Lee, the ball to Travid. That's wonderful bowling from Lee. Dravid waiting at the striker's end. goes, right out of the ground. Let's see the action replay of that.
Oh, that one went right through him.
This was the end of the innings for Travel. McGrath has done another over of this long spell. Fielded by the man out long on. India. Ganguly facing. Should be some runs here. Fielded down at fine leg by Simons. McGrath to Ganguly. Steered expertly into the gap. Fielded by the man out long on. Just one run. McGrath continues. Clark out at long on. Another. McGrath continues. That's over the rope. 6 runs off McGrath. We can have a look at that again. Nine runs came from that over.
It's about time we saw
Lee to Gambhir. That's found the gap in the field. Fielded by the man out long on. That take Lee, the bowl to Ganguly. That's gone a long way. Lee, not like that at all. Let's take a look at that in slow motion. Lee continues. Over the rope. 6 runs off Lee.
He's always looking.
Let's take a look at that in slow motion. Ganguly waiting at the striker's end. And the end of the over.
That was a costly over. You can't afford to concede.
McGrath continues. He's worked that into the gap. Clark out at long on. McGrath to Gambhir. Fielded by the man out long on. Ganguly facing. McGrath continues. McGrath continues. Six. Well, that was six as soon as he hit. Let's see the action replay of that. Nine overs are left in the innings. Gambhir is now on strike. McGrath held it long on. Gambhir, Yuvraj Singh waiting at the striker's end. Singh Clark continues. That's pierced the offside field. Another Yuvraj Singh facing. Fielded by the man at long on. It's Clark to Gambhir. McGrath out at long on. In Yuvraj Singh facing. There it goes. That's the first boundary for Yuvraj Singh. 8 overs are left for India. This partnership. Lee continues. Lee, the ball to Gambhir. For Yuvraj Singh waiting at the striker's end. He's got hold of that one out of the ground. Let's take a look at that in slow motion. Fielded by the man at long on. For Lee to Gambhir. Scored. Lee, the ball to Yuvraj Singh. In the air and gone. For those of you watching, this was how the wicket fell. Gambhir face an over of spin. Gambhir, Dhoni facing. Steered expertly into the gap. McGrath out at long on. That's Clark continues. Fielded by the man at long on. Dhoni waiting at the striker's end. There it goes. Clark to Gambhir. Should be some runs here. McGrath out at long on. Clark continues. They've turned that into 2. That's good running. 7 runs were picked up from that over by Dhoni. Gambhir is now on strike. Play it away with comfort. Fielded by the man at long on. Lee continues. That's over the rope. 6 runs off Lee. Let's see the action replay of that. Good ball. They have Dhoni waiting at the striker's end. That's superb bowling from Lee. Lee continues. They have 5 wickets in hand. Lee to bowl to Dhoni. Lee had the batsman in trouble with that one. Lee has bowled 7 overs. Clark to begin a new over. Gambhir facing. Gambhir has reached his 50 from 9 balls. Clark continues. Clark to Dhoni. That's gone high in the air. That's the Gambhir facing. He's worked that into. McGrath out at long on. India. Dhoni waiting at the striker's end. There it goes.
The bowler doesn't look too happy about that one. Misfields are infuriating for him.
McGrath is not going to reach that. We can have a look at that again. Lee continues. Lee, the ball to Dhoni. He's gone, caught by, that flew off the edge, but he managed to get a hand to it, and this was how the inning, Harbhajan Singh facing. It's gone way into the stands. 6 runs. Let's take a look at that in slow motion. Well bowled. Lee continues. Lee continues. That's the first boundary for Harbhajan Singh. 8 runs were picked up from that over by Harbhajan Singh. Harbhajan Singh is now on strike. That's the Harbhajan Singh waiting at the striker's end. That's over the rope. 6 runs off Clark. Let's see the action replay of that. Clark has got him.
He lost the line of the ball. He went straight through.
This was how the Clark took the darker. Agarkar facing.
That could prove very costly later in the match.
Clark continues. There it goes. Single to Agarkar. 9 runs came from that over for India. Lee to begin a new over. Lee to bowl to Agarkar. That was a cracking delivery from Lee. Agarkar waiting at the striker's end. That's cleared the boundary. 6 runs. That's the first boundary. We can have a look at that again. Lee, the batsman in trouble with that one. Lee continues. 3 runs here. Fielded by the man out long on. Just 1 run. Gambhir waiting at the striker's end. He's worked that into the gap. McGrath out at long on. And the end of the over. Hogg to start another over of this long spell. Played into the gap. Fielded by the man at long on. India have taken their total on to 7 for 198. Hogg to bowl to Agarkar.
That's out. What a great sight for a bowler. Stumps flying.
This was the end. Hogg to cut. It's edged and out. A great catch. He got his hands in the... This was how the inning... Nehra to face the hat-trick ball. Played away with comfort. McGrath out at long on. That's... Hogg continues. McGrath out at long on. Another single to Gambhir. 9 for 200. Nehra facing. There it goes. Batsman will have to be more careful now, having got away with that. A couple there to Nehra. That brings the innings to a close with a total at 9 for 202. Australia. Two bowlers have now been used by Ganguly.
Australia haven't been pegged back from maintaining the...
India. Hayden. Ganguly is switching to round the wicket. Oh, big shout for that one. And the umpire's given it.
That was a good decision.
We can have a look at that. Ganguly is going to try over the wicket. That struck him in front. Loud appeal. The umpire raised his finger and he's out. This was how the wicket fell. Martin Ganguly on a hat-trick. Must be close. He's out.
A tough decision by the umpire, but he seemed certain.
Ganguly gets his third wicket.
What a spell of bowling this is proving to be.
This was how the wicket fell. The next man in is Kadek. Ganguly is coming around the wicket. Kadek facing. Confident appeal. Let's see the action replay of that. Ganguly to Kadek. Struck in front. He's out.
A difficult decision for the umpire there.
This was the end of the innings for Katic. There's a change. Gilchrist waiting at the striker's end. Nehra to bowl to Gilchrist. Agaka is after it. That's found the gap in the field. That's racing away to the square leg boundary. Let's take a look at that in slow motion. Gilchrist facing. They have Gilchrist facing. Struck in front. The umpire raised his finger and he's out.
Good decision by the umpire.
This was how the innings ended for Gilchrist. Nehra is switching to round the wicket. Oh, that's close. And the umpire's given it.
That was a good decision by the...
This was how the wicket fell. Here comes the first shot. Ganguly continues. That struck him in front. Loud appeal. And the umpire's given it.
That was a tough decision.
We can have... Ganguly continues. Ganguly has got him.
That one went right through it. It was as if...
This was the end of the innings for Lee. The next batsman, Gillespie, waiting at the striker's end. That must be close. He's out.
A tough decision by the umpire, but he seemed certain.
That's the 7th wicket now for Ganguly.
This bowler has bowled really superbly.
Let's see. Ganguly to McGrath. Ganguly to bowl to McGrath. Ganguly continues. That struck him in front. Loud appeal. India are looking very, very happy. So, to sum up then, India win by 182 runs. Thanks for joining us for today's play. We very much look forward to your company at the next match.